Okay, now we'll share screen. All right, here we go. Jess, you are on.
Awesome. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. So we're going to talk about pre and post exercise fuel. I'm going to try to cover a lot, but more at like a bird's eye level today. So if you guys have any questions as we go about it, please feel free to jump on and ask, and let's chat about it. So I'm going to talk about, if you want to go to the next slide, why diet is so important around exercise, and then I'll talk a little bit about how exercise is fueled, and then we'll jump into like some specifics on pre, during, and post exercise snacks. But I do want to spend some time in the middle there talking about how exercise is fueled, because I think understanding how the body utilizes fuel during your workout can help reinforce like the need for it, but then it also helps you decide like what you're going to eat before and after exercise. And it provides, I think education is power and knowledge is power, so it'll provide hopefully some accountability for you guys. So we're going to start with, why is diet so important? And the reason it's so important is because your body has two responses to exercise. So there's an immunosuppressive response where your immune system is compromised. And that's just because the body is in this inflammatory state after any type of activity. Most of your metabolic activity is shifted towards the exercise itself. So it's kind of like your guard is down when it comes to your immune system. And this effect can last for up to 24 hours. The second thing that can happen during exercise is this catabolic response. It's this breakdown. And a lot of that is related to the release of the catecholamines in your body. So we see a breakdown of fat and protein, and then there's a glycogen depletion as well that happens right after you exercise. Then we see loss of protein, specifically branched chain amino acids. And these are important because these specific types of protein are held directly within your muscle cells. And when you exercise, these tend to be the first to go, which is bad news for us because those are the amino acids that trigger muscle repair. So that's going to be a bummer. And then we see that that's worse when carb storage is low. So these two responses, the immunosuppressive response and the catabolic response, I mean, they're a big deal. They're not good for the body. And so when I talk about this, sometimes people say, well, why would I exercise? And there's one more piece to this puzzle, though, is if you add the post-nutrition fuel, those two things don't happen. And that's where we see the benefits of exercise, is if we add the right nutrition around it, these two problems are neutralized. So how is exercise fueled? I have this demo that's should be shown on the next slide. This is me. This is a picture of me with what I call my bucket demo. I'm such a nerd that on the weekends, I don't really do home projects. I just make little science experiments that try to help people understand how metabolism works. But what I've got here is different buckets that are symbolizing different fuel sources within your body. So the largest fuel bucket that we have is going to be our fat bucket. And you can see that on the picture on the left, that's going to be your biggest bucket, and the graph on the right, that's that top pool of water. The second largest bucket of energy that we'll have is our stored carbohydrate. So this is going to be glycogen storage, what's readily available in our muscle cells and our liver cells. And I'll talk a little bit about how this is stored later on. And then we have two other buckets of fuel that our body accesses during exercise. But they're not typically, they're not sustainable or ideal. So one of them is our amino acid pool, which is our protein source. So our body can metabolize muscle while we exercise. And then the other one is our immediate energy system. So this is going to be the smallest bucket that we have. This bucket only lasts about 10 to 15 minutes. So both those buckets there on the right are not something that can sustain us for a long period of time. So we're really going to rely on the oxidation of carbohydrates and pulling from that fat bucket when it comes to exercise. Now, one of the things that comes up, so you can see there's different faucets and flows of water coming out of those bath pools. And what comes up is that when you're exercising and your heart rate goes up, the faucet to our fat pool starts to turn down. So we can't pull as much from that our fatty acid pool when the heart rate goes up, and we really rely on that stored carbohydrate pool to sustain us during exercise. So on this next slide, This is showing what we call the crossover point. So as I mentioned, your body, as heart rate goes up, we're going to rely more on carbohydrate as fuel. Whereas when we're at rest, like right now, we're actually burning more fat as fuel. And so there's this point at which our body switches from burning fat to carbohydrate to sustain the activity when we have a higher heart rate. The really cool thing about this crossover point is we have found that it can be moved. And this is a lot of the stuff Lawrence and I have done together, is working on what we call metabolic efficiency, so that you can train the body to move this crossover point farther to the right. So in other words, you could sustain a higher intensity exercise using fat as a fuel source for longer. So it's really fun that diet can manipulate that. And it's something that can really enhance performance over time. So go ahead, next slide. So these carbohydrates, they are going to be of utmost importance when it comes to exercise, because we really want to rely on that carbohydrate bucket, because we don't want to pull from muscle, and the instant energy pool doesn't last very long. So we really need to be able to have carbohydrate readily available and stored within our muscle cells. So when we have any form of carb, our body is going to either use it as blood glucose right away, or it's going to store it as glycogen. And that's what this little image is. It's my little insulin guy who's taking the glucose out of our blood and transitioning it into our body to be stored as glycogen. We're going to hold glycogen in our muscle and our liver cells. And you can hold anywhere from about 1,200 to 2,700 calories worth of energy in your cells. And again, it depends on how much carbohydrate you're consuming. All right, next slide. So this is a graph showing actual measured muscle glycogen of a cyclist who, or I'm sorry, this one is runners, where they actually measure the glycogen directly in their quad. And they're going to see what it was before a 2-hour training session and after a 2-hour training session. And then when they come back to do another session at day 2 and day 3. And what you can see, so this top bouncy graph that you see here, that's a runner who's on a high carb diet. So they're taking in about 70% of their calories from carbohydrates. And you can see they can last for 3 hard training sessions over time. Whereas the bottom line, this is someone who's on a lower carbohydrate diet, so about 40% of the diet, and their glycogen stores go down over the week. So I think of this as like the people that come in on Monday and they work out really, really well. They do a really great job. And then Tuesday, they're a little bit more tired. And then Wednesday, they're like struggling. And then Thursday rolls around and it's like, I got to take Thursday off. I'm just so tired. I'm so dead. And I think a lot of that sometimes has to do with our depleted glycogen stores over time, when really if we upped our carbohydrates, we could counteract that. So this one is another example of the high carb versus low carb diet. So this is showing time to exhaustion compared to initial muscle glycogen content. So that circle there you see, that's someone on a high fat diet, so really low muscle glycogen then, and they get tired at about 60 minutes. They hit that exhaustion point at about an hour. And then if we move to the right, you can see a normal diet, which would be like 45 to 55% carbohydrate. They'll be able to sustain activity for about twice as long. And then someone on a higher carb diet, so really working on hitting their carb numbers, is going to be able to sustain 4 times the length of that activity. So again, really working on valuing the importance of carbohydrates when it comes to exercise. I always like to touch on EPOC. So EPOC it stands for excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. And what it is, that's a fancy word for your metabolism being elevated after you exercise. And what we see is most of the workouts people do nowadays, and a lot of what you guys do at Performance Ranch, is these high intensity interval workouts. And that's like I train hard, my heart rate goes up, and then I recover for a bit. And then I train hard and I recover, train hard, recover. We know that creates this EPOC, this elevated metabolism for longer periods of time, compared to the traditional cardio workouts where we see metabolism go up, and then as you stop running or whatever you're doing, heart rate comes back down and your metabolism just goes back to normal. So it's going to be even more important that when you're doing workouts like a high intensity workout, that you take that pre and post nutrition seriously, because your body is working in some ways harder for a longer period of time, even though the workout might be a little bit shorter. Yeah, they've done studies that they found people will have that elevated EPOC for up to 24 hours after exercising. So what is your goal? And there's a whole bunch of things listed on this one. You can just go through them. When we're talking about sports nutrition, there are so many things we take into consideration. Is it metabolic efficiency? Are you trying to move that crossover point? Is it weight loss, weight gain? Are you an endurance athlete? Are you trying to become keto adapted? Are you a professional athlete? What about doing a new athletic event? Are you trying to make a weigh-in? So all of these things are going to warrant different specifics. What I'm going to talk about over the next few slides is going to be some basic fueling for sport. So this is going to be applicable to the general population, not to say if any of these other things might be your goal. So carb goals, overall, we want to look at having about 45 to 65% of your total calories from carbohydrates. And that's going to be important because we really need to make sure we're keeping that carb pool fueled at all times. And that's going to happen not just around your activity, but that's what happens that's going to be happening throughout the day. So really making sure you're getting enough carbohydrate. And then right before you exercise, ideally we'd want to have a carb dense meal about 2 to 4 hours before. And then I always get, well, what if I work out at 5:30 in the morning? Because there are a lot of 5:30 a.m.ers. If you're one of those, even getting just like a dose of 30 grams of simple carbohydrates about 15 to 30 minutes before exercise can help boost your performance. And then we'll want to add carbs during the exercise depending on duration, and I'll talk a little bit more about this here in a minute. And then we'll want to add carbohydrates immediately after exercise. So you really want to bookend your workout with carbohydrates. And again, it's because when your body is in that immunosuppressive and catabolic state when you're exercising, and carbs are going to be the antidote to that. So that's what we're looking at for carbs. Protein is also going to be as important. I always start with carbs though, because protein cannot do its job without having the carbohydrates on board, because your body's going to prioritize refueling that glycogen bucket before anything else. So we've got to have the carbs on board. And once we do that, then we can have protein, and protein will do its job, which is rebuilding muscle, trying to maintain any muscle mass or lean body mass gains, kind of depending on your goal. We'll use some protein during exercise, but not a lot. Really the role here of protein is to repair that muscle. So those are going to be the two main things we're looking at before and after exercise. And then of course, next slide, I've got hydration on here. Hydration is going to be of utmost importance. I think most people are pretty good about drinking as desired throughout exercise, but afterwards, I always have my athletes really pay attention to their urine after they work out, and making sure that their urine is on the lighter end of the scale, so between a 1 and a 3. Because once we get to a 4, and that pigment, you're already dehydrated, and we can't really rely on thirst, because thirst mechanism doesn't really kick in until you've already lost 1% of your body weight due to dehydration. So it's one of those things you really have to stay on top of it. And drinking throughout the exercise and afterwards. And you can skip the next slide, Lawrence. Go ahead and skip that one. So here we have some specifics on pre-exercise nutrition. I usually recommend shooting for a 2-to-1 carb to protein ratio. So it is going to be higher carb, lower protein. And we want to look for things that are easily digested and convenient. So I've got some examples up here. These are by no means better than anything else. These are just some things that I have found to work for a lot of the athletes I work with. And they're pretty close to that 2-to-1 carb protein ratio. But again, it's really going to be dependent on your GI tract and how your stomach handles food before you work out. I've had people that, they can eat a steak and potatoes before they exercise. And then I've had people that can barely touch an apple. So you have to play with this one, but that 2-to-1 carb to protein ratio is really what we're after there. I'm a big fan of protein pancakes before workouts. That ratio is spot on with those Kodiak cakes, and you can buy the frozen pre-made waffles. They're awesome. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are great. If you can do the Fairlife chocolate milk, though, that is a awesome pre-exercise as well. That milk is lactose-free and higher protein. Okay, so the next few slides, I'm just gonna braze over some of the pre-workout, the content you'll find in pre-workout supplements, because I know there's a lot of different variations out there. So I'm gonna do just some kind of bird's eye view of what these different compounds are doing in those pre-workouts. So caffeine is a central nervous stimulant. I think we all know that. I always joke that, like, if I could turn into anything that I consume, it would be a cup of coffee, because I love coffee so much. And part of it is because the research out there showing the ergogenic effect of caffeine is undeniable. It works. It enhances performance. It reduces time to fatigue. There's not a lot of downsides. Really, the only downside is if you have adverse GI effects. So some people that aren't used to it, it could upset their stomach. So recommended is about 2 to 3 milligrams per kilogram of body weight based on your, so it's based on your weight. And there's ways to get this naturally. You know, having a cup of coffee or a glass of green tea right before you exercise is a great way to get that caffeine in. So caffeine works. Nitric oxide is another one we've seen more and more. This is a vasodilator, so it's going to open up your blood vessels, allowing blood and oxygen to flow more freely towards your muscles. There are some adverse effects that we see: GI distress, low blood pressure, and diffusion hypoxia can present. So I've seen some adverse responses to nitric oxide, especially when it's combined with caffeine. So especially people have any blood pressure issues or like low blood volume concerns, I ask them to steer away from nitric oxide. So creatine's the next one. Creatine's another one that it's proven to work. What it does is it enhances that instant energy supply that you have, that limited supply that you have. It actually can increase the energy you pull from that by up to 50%. We haven't seen adverse effects when there's a high quality supplement. Really, it's people that have liver or kidney dysfunction. We'd want to not recommend something like this. The only thing that, my only issue with creatine is when you stop taking it, you lose the benefit. So it's one of those things that if you're in a competition or you're trying to hit a very specific goal, creatine can totally help you. But if you're just, trying to be in the best shape for life and kind of doing your thing, there's really not a need to take it. And then beta alanine, this is another one that's popping up in a lot of pre-workouts. It acts as a buffering agent to neutralize the pH that we see, the changes in pH that we see associated with exercise. That change typically enhances muscle breakdown, and so beta alanine can counteract that. Adverse effects here are going to be numbness and tingling with a high single dose, and that seems to be worse when it's combined with caffeine. So again, these are things that they're not harmful, they are helpful, but you want to be aware of how your body's responding to them to see if it's, making sure your body's taking it in okay. So when it comes to refueling, there's two main rules of thumb here. So you'll want to add some sort of carbohydrate during your exercise if you're doing a HIIT workout and trying to enhance performance, or if you're exercising for over 90 minutes. So anything outside of that, really all you need is water to exercise. But if you're doing a HIIT workout and you're looking at performance, having a dose of carbohydrate has been proven to enhance performance. But then we've also seen to sustain activity for a long period of time, like above 90 minutes, having a dose of carb is going to up your blood sugar and just give you that boost. I think we all can relate to that. If anybody's done any sort of running or cycling or hiking, it's like you hit that wall and your glycogen stores start to kind of tap out, and so you'll need something to boost it. That graph right there is just showing plasma glucose levels of a cyclist. The top line, the cyclist was given a carbohydrate beverage, and the bottom one was given a placebo. And so you can see, obviously, the one given the placebo did not get that energy boost and was not able to finish the ride compared to the one that was. So right here, I've got just a chart for you guys' reference on the ideal sports beverage. So if you click again, you'll see this top the top bar here, this has the ideal composition for a sports beverage. We'll want about 6 to 8% of it to be carbohydrate. And what I've got is some more common ones like Gatorade and Powerade. You can see it falls within that 6 to 8%. And then there's specifics on the type of carb and the amount of electrolytes that you have. I say people try different ones, see what feels good in you. Coconut water is a great option, especially because the type of carbohydrate in coconut water is really useful to the body. It is higher potassium and sodium than the ideal composition, but some people feel really well, or they respond really well to that. But I just like that as a reference point. So when you are picking out a sports beverage, you can kind of compare and see how it lines up to that, and then see how your body responds. So post-exercise, again, we'll want to refuel the glycogen stores. So getting the carbohydrate to refuel what you've burned off, and then repair muscle. Those are the two things we're looking at. So again, book ending your workout with carbohydrates. When it comes to the protein piece here, you'll want to get at least that 10 to 20 grams of high quality protein with carbohydrates right after you work out. And then having protein in about 20 to 40 gram doses at 2-hour intervals after you exercise. So the way I think about this is it's like, okay, you go work out, you do your thing, you have a protein shake with like a banana, and that's what you have immediately afterwards. And then you go home and then you make breakfast and you have your hit of protein and then carbohydrates with it as well. And then about 2 hours later, maybe you have a snack with like some beef jerky and some fruit. And so you're getting this dose to help repair the body consistently for a few hours after the activity. So quality of protein, you know, I mentioned you want high quality protein, and a lot of people say, well, what is high quality protein? Animal protein does contain more of the amino acids, and so it's considered a higher quality protein, but that's not to say that you can't get it from plants. You just have to be a little bit more strategic and combine different plant sources. Whey protein is an animal protein. It comes from milk, and it is probably the most effective protein after a workout. It's quick digesting. It has these branched chain amino acids that will trigger muscle repair. So it's really, really effective and helpful. It's just, again, if your body can handle it, because I have some athletes that they have sensitivities to whey. So whey, although it might be the ideal gold standard, it might not agree with them. So you really have to see how your body responds to it. Go ahead and skip the next slide. We'll jump over to, so for post-exercise, I have some examples up here. Greek yogurt with berries and a little bit of honey is an awesome post-exercise snack. It has, if you get a cup of Greek yogurt, you can get 24 grams of protein in it, and then throw like half a cup of fruit on it, and you're hitting your carbs as well. So it's a great, great post-exercise. Beef jerky is easy. A lot of people like it because you can pack it, and then having that with some fruit, you can hit those numbers pretty quick. If you have the time to go home and make something, avocado toast is so delicious. I swear it tastes better after you exercise. It's already good enough, but then after you exercise, it tastes even better. And then of course, there's always shakes. A lot of people do shakes. The only thing I like to really be clear about is if you're doing a protein shake after you work out and it's a scoop of water or a scoop of protein and water, you will absolutely want to make sure you have some sort of fruit on the side. Because remember, we want to replenish glycogen stores and provide the body with protein as well. So lots of information here, but these are the 3 things I always come back to. Is eat what you want, hit your targets, and listen to how your body responds. So what I mean by that is, you know, when it comes to pre and post exercise nutrition, pick some of the foods that sound good to eat around your workout. See if you can tailor the portion sizes to hit some of those targets you're after, and then see how your body responds. And if it does, great. And if we need to tweak it, you will need to tweak it. So, you know, pre-exercise, ideally, you know, having a carb dense meal right before, and then having like a carb hit, so like some gummies right before you exercise, is ideal. But we'll have to see if your body feels good having those gummies right before, or if you can't eat that close to exercise. So again, you really have to listen to how your body responds, and then we tailor it from there. So that is what I have for you guys today. Do you guys have any questions?
I'm gonna unmute everybody real quick, just
Okay.
because. I'll let Rogelio joined in. Thanks for coming in. Oops, there you go. And Kathleen is eating, so I'll keep her unmuted.
All right.
Questions, anybody? Peggy, Rogelio, Kathleen?
How do you talk? So I have somebody that's like that I just started working with, that's like increasing her running, trying to run a marathon, but doesn't like to eat before or after, and she does intermittent fasting. Like, how do you tell somebody, like, look,
Jess, you actually got her fuel plan information last night.
Yeah, she started today, so I'm hoping that
yesterday
that it'll help.
ate. Yeah.
Yeah, that's tricky because, and you know, the thing about the body is like it can sustain, right? I believe you. She's doing all that, and she's probably like, "Well, I'm fine. Like I'm hitting my goals." I just usually dare them to try it. I'm like, okay, first of all, what's the worst that could happen? And kind of explore that with them. And then I'm like, let's just try it. And if I'm wrong and this doesn't help you, then you can go back to your ways. But I've never had that backfire. So probably my best example, my best friend, she qualified for Boston several times, and she was like that. She was like, I don't need to eat. And so I was like, I dare, just try it. I was like, come on, like give me, like just try out the stuff that I've, you know, gone to school for. See if I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
And she tried it, and it'll change. I feel really confident it changes their performance and they feel better. So I think if you can just get her to, you know, be willing to try it, and then really ask her, you know, how did it feel? What was your energy level? Did you cramp more? The only thing that, you know, I think is hard is sometimes people do cramp. So finding the right kind of fuel, it can be tricky. But yeah, you just got to get her to try it. She'll feel better. I guarantee it.
Yeah,
I guarantee it. Just say, if I'm wrong, you can go back to your ways, you know?
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you bet.
Peggy, anything? Rogelio?
Well, I was just going to ask the fasting question also.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit more. What do you want to know about fasting?
Well, if you want to teach your body how to burn fat, because like you said, fat is your biggest fuel source, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing this ultra marathon, I'm not an ultra marathoner, by the way, but if you're doing this, like, you know, low intensity but last forever event, if you can burn fat, you don't have to carry a lot of stuff with you or anything, as long as you have enough hydration, right?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, so you're talking about becoming keto adapted for like an endurance event.
Right.
So it's not so much fasting, it's becoming keto adapted to where your body doesn't get carbohydrates. And that's something, when I do that with athletes, it's for a very short period of time. It's not something that's sustainable, nor is it great for your microbiome long term, but it's like something for my ultra marathoners. I'll say, okay, let's become keto adapted for the 6 weeks up to your event, and then let's wean you off of it afterwards.
So you would not. So it's only recommended for short periods of time. you know, months or something, but not years.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even the like kids who follow a keto diet to become keto adapted for who have epilepsy, because we do know it stops seizures. Even they take breaks from it. It's not intended to be something that you follow indefinitely.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, I can get more of a statement. Like, I know I worked with Jess, and I got my fuel plan last year in May, and like you Peggy, I didn't start until December, you know, so I had it for 7 months, and I was like, I'll try it, and I dabbled with it. I mean, we tried that 75 hard, and you know, we tried to do all these different things. I couldn't, I just wasn't doing it how I should have done it. So December, there was a little bit of a cash prize, so I started, and I bought a scale, and I did portions. I did everything like I needed to actually do, so I was hitting my marks. And I saw in 6 weeks I lost 20 pounds, which is crazy. Like my intention wasn't really to lose weight; it was just to get lean. But my weight went down, my body fat went up. I'm sorry, my body fat went down, and my muscle mass basically stayed exactly the same. So, which was good because her and I had worked together, and we made myself more efficient at burning fat as energy. So my intensity wasn't that high. That was the issue. Also, I kept my intensity down on purpose so I wouldn't have to tap into those carbohydrate stores and fatigue myself so I could work out every day. But now my intensity's up, so I've actually added carbs a lot more back in. Like my workout today for my strength was Fruity Pebbles and Fairlife milk. So it's just simple sugar, protein. It's super easy. It tastes great. I mean, I love Fruity Pebbles. Absolutely love them. I could have a whole box.
They're so good.
I could have a whole
So
box
good.
easily. But that's just the thing, right? So I'm trying to, and I do it exactly how Jeff's telling me. Like I'm balancing my carbs based on my output. So everything's based on exercise. So if I know if I'm gonna exercise hard, if I'm gonna go on a long bike ride, like Saturday, for instance, I'm gonna go for 4 hours. So I know I'm going 4 hours on my mountain bike. I'm gonna probably expend between 2,000 and 2,500 calories just in the 4 hour time. So Friday night, I'm gonna start to load up a little bit more. My carbs will be heavier. It'll probably be a pizza night just to make sure my carbs are up. I'll probably have a beer just to keep getting. I'll have my water also. But I'm just trying to think about, okay, what am I gonna do to upload in the first time? So then when I'm post, then I can know, okay, I gotta make sure I have those carbohydrates there also. But yeah, it's all related to, for me, it's all related to my intensity and then my duration. Like Jess said, I don't have anything more than water if my workout is an hour or less, even 90 minutes. I can survive 90 minutes on water alone and electrolytes. I definitely have that because I sweat a lot, so I have to have some type of electrolyte type of supplement, something like the Hammer Endurolites, or I mean there's a ton out there now. There's those little tabs you put in your water bottle, so things like that.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I don't know. Anybody else? Questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So, I came in late. I thought this started a different time. But I was wondering if you spoke about or able to speak to how the research for like grave shift workers and people that have to be up late at night and stuff like that is focusing more on maybe like fasting as a way to kind of eat in synchrony with like your what's it called, the clock,
The circadian clock.
the circadian rhythm there.
Yeah.
And just like if you could speak on that or really anything.
I haven't looked at that research for a long time. I mean, what I remember looking at it is it's not good, right? I mean, it's pretty tough on their bodies, especially those shift workers are tough. The fasting, what I know is that when you fast for like that 8 to 12 hours that coincides with our circadian rhythm, there are microbiome benefits. And so, I just think that's tricky because you could apply that right to the shift workers and say like, okay, let's fast during this time and see if we can help it. But at the same time, they're not sleeping during that time. Right. So, I don't know. I'd have to look at what the newer stuff is saying in terms of like the intermittent fasting. Have you read anything?
Yeah. So I went to my master's program. I was with my buddy Hunter Waldman, and now he's at UNA. But that's like what his research kind of focuses on. And his is specific to firefighters, but he pushes a kind of high-fat, low-carb diet more for like shift workers and them, because of like what the benefits, I guess, to like reactive oxygen species and everything like that. But I haven't gone like full depth into it. My semester just ended, so now I'll be able to. But yeah, that's always like super interesting to me because for a normal person, right, it doesn't like really matter what your like carbohydrate fat breakdown
Right.
is, but right now research is kind of leading to maybe it's a little better in the long term for someone that's like that to have higher fats and lower carbs. But I just
And so
haven't asked
are
anyone.
they combining it with the intermittent fasting? Is that what they're doing?
I think it kind of depends on the research study. I know he's kind of like done both, but
Yeah.
I think he's released a couple, so I can send them to you just to.
I would love to read that. My husband's a cop, so
Okay, yeah,
yeah, I
perfect.
work a lot with the first responders, so I would love to look at that. That's fascinating.
Cool. Yeah, I'll write it down.
Do you have my email? Lawrence has it.
Yeah, I have it. I have a
Yeah.
video.
Okay, cool.
Well,
Oh,
good.
Nutrition is so nerdy, and I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
It's so exciting.
Well, awesome, Jess. I want to thank you very much. I'll
Yeah, you
share this
bet.
with I'll share the link back to you also, so you can have it for yourself. I'll actually stop the recording right now.